Hey, Dad, welcome to the show, Father on Purpose. We're excited because we're in part 5. Well, I'm excited anyway, but I'm not just excited because
You're excited because we're in part 5?
we're excited because we're in part 5, man. This is almost over. Goodness, this is killing me. We decided to do a 6-part series on the top issues that surfaced from our last couple years of survey data, where dads tell us what their big challenges are. And so this is a listener-driven series, which I've really enjoyed doing.
Mhm.
And we're on part 5 of 6. So if you're like dropping in for the very first time, welcome. Today's show will be standalone. You don't have to go back and listen to the first 4. But if you want, feel free. Hit pause, go back and listen to the first 4, and then rejoin us because you're in part 5 of a 6-part series called From Overwhelmed to Intentional. We're trying to take this idea that so many dads have told us they feel overwhelmed by being a father for various reasons. And we're picking those apart one at a time and trying to provide some biblical wisdom and some hope and some ideas for how to move from overwhelmed to intentional. Part 5 this week will deal with moving forward even when you have very little hope. Or if you would say the phrase, man, what if it's too late? If you would say that phrase about some area of your life, or you've ever been tempted to say that, today's show is for you. Before we dive in, remember, today's show is brought to you by Range Leather. Our friends Kyle and Bailey Coster out in Laramie, Wyoming run a great shop. They make amazing products. They support this show, so let's go support them by ordering some cool Range Leather gear. Go to rangeleather.com and use the code MJ15 when you order to get 15% off your order of a bag, a journal, a wallet, some earrings, an Apple Watch band, or their brand new Bighorn Weekender. If you got some extra dough, that's a cool way to travel. That's part 1. Part 2. There are a little over 90 people, I think it's 92 or 93 people. I was just sending out some thank you notes today to the state of California and the state of Texas. Some of our newest Fatherhood Guard members came from those states. Join guys from more than 23 U.S. states and a couple foreign countries and support our ministry every single month. You can do that, become a monthly donor, which we call the Fatherhood Guard, at manhoodjourney.org/guard, Guard. When you do, we're going to send you a snappy Range Leather hat to commemorate your membership. And if you're watching on video, I have mine on today. So Lawson, here we are, part 5, From Overwhelmed to Intentional. Before we dive in today, you and I had some extra time to talk yesterday. I'm sure you're going to bring that up, and we'll talk a little bit about what we decided to add to today's show in that regard. The first 4 shows are behind us. Reflect just a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the last few shows, and as we've talked to dads about moving from being overwhelmed to intentional, what are some thoughts you've had as you reflect back on the first few shows in the series?
Yeah, well, speaking of that, the reason I'm dressed like this is because the pipe in my front yard burst, and I've been outside in 35 degrees weather trying to.
I'm laughing with you. I'm not laughing at you.
Right, right. You didn't catch that I said speaking of. Um,
Wow.
yeah, anyway.
Well played. Wow,
There goes that
that's
joke.
fantastic.
Uh, yeah, so the series overview, think of here's what I think of is kind of from the survey data. Dads, they're not incapable, dads are
Sure.
capable. Most everybody, and especially the ones I think, listening to this podcast and other things like this, going to men's group, they're on the right track. Um, but there is a resounding, like, overextended,
Mhm.
uncertain, maybe a little discouraged. I feel like
Mm.
time has come up, quite a bit, time
Yeah.
and energy. In fact, the first episode was about, running out of time and energy. Um, the second one was about listening versus instructing, and kind of the title was "Why Won't They Listen?" And we turned that mirror around just a little bit and said, "How are
Yeah.
we communicating?"
Yeah.
And then am I leading, or am I always sort of in this reactionary mode? There's a big difference between,
Mm.
being able to get ahead of things and lead kind of from the front versus sitting in the back seat and things are
Yeah.
swerving back and forth, and you just kind of feel like you're along for the ride and don't know exactly what to do except scream sometimes. Um, and then the last episode that we just did before today was
Mm,
about being an example and not a hero. And I really like, especially how you in particular went down the road of yeah, we are the example. We are the earthly example of our heavenly Father, and there are other men in the Bible. There is of course obviously
yeah.
Jesus, and we reflect that, and we follow Jesus' example, and in the doing of that, we are the example as well, and also kinda to take the pressure off, like, we're not here to be our children's hero, and so I thought that was fantastic. Today, I do believe that there are well, I know, I've had it in my own life too, and you and I talked, like, there are
Yeah.
times where for episode 5 today, you feel like it might be too late.
Yeah.
Like, things are off track.
Mm.
Either they've done it or I've done it or the world or, just whatever circumstances. And so what if you feel like it is? What if you feel like, I just it's gone so far off track.
Mm.
I can't even look. I can't even see how to get I can't see the track to get it back there.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
can be really scary and overwhelming
Sure.
and so that's what we're talking about today.
So, by the way, nice recap, by the way. And I kind of put you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to do that. And boy, you just hit them all. That was very efficient. I'm proud of you. Especially after having to wrestle your water out of the front yard there in the freezing temperatures.
You would think down here on the panhandle of Florida, between
Hmm.
you, what do you get, like 15 inches of
I
snow and it's
know. Of
been
the
r
three of us, you got Louisville, Nashville, and Florida, and the Florida
right,
guy has his pipes freeze.
right.
That's ironic, but such is the case this week. Like if you're listening to this in the future, this has been a bitter cold week for most of America. At like temperatures down below zero and a lot of icy rain. It's been really challenging and very unpleasant for a lot of people. We've been fortunate where I live. We have underground utilities, and so often thunderstorms and snow and stuff
Yeah.
do not mess with us. So this week is the same. We've got warmth and heat, and as a bonus, for about a month and a half, I couldn't work exactly. My remote control wasn't working perfectly for my natural gas fired fireplace upstairs, and April, my wife, is now like her new best friend in the world is ChatGPT. That is absolutely her new best friend, ChatGPT. And we were about to get the company that put our gas logs in a year and a half ago to come out and take a look, but there was this pretty exorbitant service fee, like really expensive. And April goes, "Why don't you just talk to Chat about that?" And so I did. Found out the problem was not in the remote itself, but in a receiver device tucked into the fireplace.
Yep.
There's another set of batteries. 4 AA batteries later, my fireplace
Oh,
worked
man.
perfectly. Bro, I felt both like the smartest guy in the world because we just saved $180 of a service fee, and also the dumbest guy in the world because for 6 weeks we've been like yelling at this thing, getting it to work, and going, "How come the dumb remote don't work?" Um,
That's funny.
Here's back on track. Back on track. Sorry, I got a little off track as we talked about the weather. Um, the things we hear in our survey data, the phrases guys type in to some of these answers. I want to read a few of those,
Yeah.
and I want a dad to listen and ask yourself, have you ever said something like this, or you've said something really similar to this? So, for example, you've had guilt over the past, or
Yes.
you've
Check.
struggled parenting adult children. And if you have adult children, wink, wink, you know what I mean. You've had rebellious or prodigal kids. They've been gone, maybe emotionally gone or relationally gone, or maybe physically gone. Like you haven't seen them in a month or 6 or a year. I know guys in that category right this second.
Mhm. Yep.
Maybe you've tried to rebuild strained relationships. There was broken trust. There were hurtful words. There was a moment, an issue, a situation. You didn't handle it well. They didn't handle it well. and the relationship has never been fully restored, or you've been through something really difficult with your marriage, like separation or estrangement or divorce, and any one of these topics could be weighing on you. And some guys, probably a mix of more than one of these, can be dogging them right this minute. So if you're listening, today's show is for you. It's for the guy who thinks, man, it's really, really hard right now. And you're tempted to think, it's too late. There's really no hope. There's really no hope.
Mm.
And the key reframe that we want to take your situation, and like those old Viewmaster things we had as kids where you clicked the button and the little disc spun and you got different photographs. We want you to click it one click forward, and we want you to see a different picture with regard to your circumstances. And it's this: God does some of his best work when things are at their worst. God does some of his best work when things are at their worst. And there's tensions that we live in. And I'll let you talk about some of those tensions here in a second. But the key reframe, right? God does some of his best work when we are at our worst and when the situation's at its worst. And at the bottom of a lot of these fears, at the bottom of a lot of these challenges, I'm going to propose that our issue is not so much with our circumstances as much as it is with how well we do or don't understand the character of God.
Mm-hmm. That's a heavy thought, bro. And for someone who's in the thick of it, that can fall on deaf ears.
Sure.
Just being transparent and
Yeah.
thoughtful about, the guy that is like, I love that. Like the to reframe for sure. I think it's probably more than one click ahead. I think you've fast forwarded way, in some guys' instances, way far forward to say you can reframe it and see things differently. And I do believe, and I think you're right, this isn't a question of circumstance or behavior. This is a question of, do you believe that God does some of his best redemptive work when things have failed? If you do, hold on to that, because a couple things. He can do immeasurably more than we can think or imagine. He uses all things for his good. Hold on to those thoughts. But
Yeah.
what that doesn't do is relieve the circumstance immediately.
Yeah.
Okay, so if
Right.
if in your life, like I've got a buddy, this was not long ago, but not 5 years ago, but not 5 months ago. And he said, dude, who I am is so toxic that more of me in my kid's life is the worst thing that can be done for them.
Wow.
Like, he's messed things up in his mind. He has messed things up so badly that he thinks less of him is the answer.
Is the answer, right?
And there are guys that um I know he's they've broken things so badly that you just look at it and go, "I don't think I can put that back together. I don't think it's not possible." And you said something, yesterday to me that, like, part of this answer is trusting God and knowing that the fact is it may not be restored here on earth with you in these upcoming moments. You've got to trust that he restores on his timeline. Um, and whew, that's a tough
Yeah.
pill to swallow and to
Well,
think about.
a good example, your friend who says he's so toxic, and right now is, he's all he does is bring more trouble to the situation. That may be true for a while, right? That may be true for a month or 6 or a year. I'm not going to debate it in theory, right? And recognizing that is sometimes really, really healthy, even though it doesn't
Mhm.
make it better, right? This split second. Here's, I think, the challenge, right? The challenge is when we take a set of circumstances that could be, with God's intervention, uh, time bound, right? In other words, there could be a problem that may last for a month or a year or a decade, but it doesn't have to last forever. And we add infinity to it. So what we do is we go, "Hey, you know
Yeah,
what?
we do. Yep,
Things are so bad right now, and they will never get better."
right.
And words like never and always, and we add
Yeah.
infinity to something that with the snap of a finger, God could change. And so for us, I was talking with my son, Jeremy, recently about this very topic, and we were talking about our words and how I got two eyes and I've got two ears. So I have these four input devices, and then I have this output device, right? That's my mouth. I can't wait till I get to heaven and get to ask God about a few topics. Now, honestly, okay, by the time I get to heaven, I probably won't care about any of this, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I'm going to care about any of this. One of the things I'm going to ask him is show me moments in my life that I thought were good that actually were not very good, and vice versa. Show me the moments in my life, like replay the tape of my life and explain to me how the bad moments, in some cases, were better than what I would have called the good moments, because he has
Okay,
just this
right.
way. One of the other things I'm going to ask him about is how words work. In other words, Jesus is called the Word. God's inspired scripture is called the Word of God. God says he spoke the world into existence. So like every blade of grass, every gold, every chemical, every air molecule, every bit of water on this planet spoken by the word of God. So like something about our words is just really powerful. And on today's topic, some guys take a situation, women too, but I mean some men take a situation that has the ability to change over time, and they just freeze it in forever. And they use this language
Mhm.
like, this will never be restored. I will never get back to where I was before. I will never be helpful or productive, or my kids will never trust me again, or my wife will never trust me again. And we add infinity to it. And when we do that with our own mouth, with our own heart, we're building like this brick wall in between us sometimes and what I think God really wants to do in our lives. And we got to be super careful about that, because our circumstances may be really bad, and we may have a situation that is going to take quite a while to resolve, and it may never get fully resolved.
Mhm.
Um, but it may get much better. It may get redeemed in a way we can't anticipate. It may not be that, you may not get your left arm back, or you may not get your finances back, or you may not get your first marriage back. However, God may still have a plan to use your life in a way that's really powerful. And we
Yeah,
see these examples
that's what
in
I was about to
scripture a
say.
lot.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that there are stories of real people that they're not just where someone kinda mildly broke the rule or, broke the law or, you know, stabbed somebody in the back a little bit, but, yeah, maybe not really, wasn't all that bad. No, there was some bad stuff that happened, and then the redemption story, and so, yeah, you may well, let me say a couple things. It may feel like forever, but that's probably what we're feeling is the consequences. Those
Mm,
consequences, they may hurt, but they're probably finite. But let's not overlay that
mm,
on the grace that is
yeah.
infinite.
Mm,
I think you
yeah.
said it better than that when we were talking before, but something along those lines. But I will say you've got to really want to do the work of restoration. You've got to want to be open. You've gotta wanna be, you've gotta reveal your heart, you gotta tear your chest open and lay it out there. You gotta do some hard things. Just deciding that what you've done was wrong, that doesn't repair the situation.
Mm,
You gotta go in. You gotta, you know, you gotta accept that responsibility if it's yours, um, or, sometimes even harder than that is to broach the topic with someone else who is not accepting the responsibility. That can get tricky too, especially when it's, your teen daughter who storms off after an argument and says, "I hate you." Right then, right in that moment, that may not be the exact right moment to go address it. But I do want to call out that there's like this shelf life on anger that can become extended
mm,
with time.
mm,
If you sweep things under the rug, that small cut gets a little infected, and before you know it, it begins to fester and turns into a wound that is really, really hard to heal. So typically, yeah, you may need to give the air give some space, like the my buddy that says he's so toxic that he makes it worse. The best thing for him right now, I happen to know, and I believe, is for him to get help himself in
Yeah.
some areas.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's gonna mean that he gives everybody else a break and some space, and then he may come back. But, like, in the Bible, there are scriptures and there are stories that explain what God can do. And I
Yeah.
think if there are people listening that are feeling like, "Yeah, I hear all this, but you don't understand what I did," or "You don't understand what they did." Um, well, David did some pretty awful things, like, the whole story with, Bathsheba
Yeah.
it's adultery, yeah, but, dude, it was, like, his best friend,
Yeah.
and he was
Right.
warned against it. It was he was warned against it at least once, realized it, and then, kinda shoulder shrug and was like, "I know exactly what I'm about to go do, and I know it's wrong, and I'm gonna go do it."
Yeah.
And then what happened? The story of David goes on to unfold, and he becomes this older, wiser man, and but that's not just somebody kinda or like, Judas and Peter both. That's an interesting one that, you were talking about, that might be a topic on its own. I think there's something to really pull apart there. I mean, to betray someone who has poured so much of themselves into your life that you believe in when we're following, and then to just completely betray them, um, that is something that,
Yeah.
Judas on one hand, but then Peter went on to become Peter, so God can do what he's gonna do, regardless of how badly we might mess things up.
Yeah. Well, and what's fascinating is, in both a sad and uh, Herculean, amazingly way, is when you look at Judas and Peter. If you were to ask a group of 10-year-olds at church on a Sunday school who betrayed
Mhm.
Jesus, they'd all go Judas. They all know the answer to the Bible quiz, who betrayed Jesus, and it's Judas. But so did Peter. Um, and in some ways, equally, if not as uh, problematic. And it's yeah, sure. Judas handed him over, and that's what caused Peter, Jesus to fulfill the prophecies of being crucified. And so Judas had this really unfortunate role he ended up playing. But Peter betrayed Jesus as well, more than once, 3 times in a row. And the odd thing, not odd, but just to add insult to injury, it was just hours after the Last Supper where Jesus told him it was going to happen. And he didn't even really say, "Hey, Peter, watch out, because, this might happen tonight. Here, I'm going to give you some advance notice just so you can maybe head this off." No, Jesus was like, "Nah, here's what's going to happen. You're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows." Like, and you know what? It's going to happen. Now, was that because Jesus made Peter do that? No, he just knew the future in advance. And so Jesus was able to tell Peter. And fascinating thing is, fast forward to today, you and I could fly to Rome and go to uh, St. Peter's Basilica, right? We go to St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome because Peter came back. Peter ended up repenting, coming back, finding his faith again. And what's fascinating to me is um, a lot of guys are living right this minute in that moment. They're still in that moment where it's the in between. It's the
Mhm.
it's the
Yeah.
in between of the problem, and they're still standing in the negative consequences, and they may be for a while. It may take months or years to get them all the way sorted. Um, but they're not on the other end yet. But like, if when you and I go to heaven and we get to walk up to Peter, right, and we could say, "Peter, man, you were one of the guys on my list I really wanted to meet." He's not going to go, "Hey, man, just real quick, I just want to again apologize for betraying Jesus.
That's funny.
I still feel bad about that." That is not what he's going to say. That is
Yeah.
not what he's going to say. He's not still up there going, I just never going to get over it. Golly, every day another 10,000 people come into heaven and they all got to remind me. That is not what is happening, right? That is not what is happening, because Peter fully accepted reinstatement and redemption and reconciliation. Like, he fully accepted it. And some guys, they may still be holding the consequences,
Right.
but they don't have to be holding the mental burden of, like, this is the way it's going to be forever. We got to fully accept the redemption and the restoration and the reconciliation. And sometimes that can be really hard for us to do.
Yeah. I also love the prodigal son story. Luke 15:20 says, "But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming and felt compassion."
Yeah.
And you've seen the artwork of where it's an image of the father running
Yeah.
toward the son. Like, that's just such a vision to me of the father's forgiveness and the restoration that he just so is, like, prayerful about and anticipating and wanting so badly, and you just imagine that dad had gone out looking,
Mm.
probably every morning and every night before it got dark, like, I wonder if he'll return, and then he sees him and just can't hold himself back, he just runs. There will come that day, the mistakes may have been done, the consequences might be real, but restoration is available. Um, talk, Kent, y y about the analogy of the car, veering slightly off the road.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
just the most it can be the most minute, 1 degree off, because what I said earlier was about having, like a shelf life on anger or a shelf life on hurt, and you don't always have to, like, and remember the old saying about, like,
Yeah.
"Don't let the sun go down on your argument,"
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you just keep bearing into your wife, or you don't let your kid go to sleep until everything is resolved, period, and then 3, 4 a.m. comes and everybody's just even in a worse mood and super
Yeah.
tired. That can make things worse. But but there are these moments where if the car is veering slightly off, now right then is the time to just kinda
Yeah.
correct the steerage just a little bit, and maybe you've done something, maybe someone in your family has done something, it could be the time where, it's time to turn the car all the way around and go back home, or stop your jogging and go back right now and apologize, because
Yeah.
that's the moment for it.
Yeah. Well, we've all been there where we've been in a car. I mean, the vast majority, probably 99% of the listeners, you've been in a car and you've gotten a little off center. Maybe you crossed the middle line. Maybe you were texting and driving. Don't text and drive, kids. Put your phone down. Or, you hit those rumble strips, right? And you heard them. And then you corrected and got back on. We've also probably, some of us may have either fallen asleep at the wheel, or we didn't correct soon enough and we found ourselves hanging a tire or running into the gravel. And then the car became very hard to control and much harder to get back on the road. Like, if you've ever noticed, if you're on the rumble strips, it's just a gentle correction and you're back on the road. If you hang a tire off a 1-inch lip and half your car's riding
Yeah.
on the gravel, man, it takes a little doing to get it back on track. And sometimes it can, and then the worst thing, right, is that we just keep on going and we go past the gravel into the ditch or off the side of the cliff, right? I remember one time we were driving from Denver to Keystone, Colorado, and I didn't mean to do this, but I took a particular road. I think it was called Loveland Pass, if I remember right. Nothing loving about that road. I hated every inch of that road because it goes way up. I don't know, 10, 12,000, 14,000 feet. You're way up in the mountains. We landed like on Memorial Day, like middle of May, late May, early June. And we land and it's like 60 degrees at the airport. And by the time we got to the top of Loveland Pass, it was snowing. Like, you literally drove up into Narnia is how it felt. Like, the White Witch lives at the top of Loveland Pass. And I just remember hating that drive. I don't like heights very much. I'm not a big heights guy. And the whole time I'm driving, I'm like, everybody be quiet. Daddy needs to think, and I'm going like every inch matters. And I'm correcting and correcting and correcting because, like, the wrong turn on that road and it's thousands of feet to your death, right? Like, it's a steep cliff off some edges. Um, for us as dads, the metaphor plays really well when you think about conflict, misunderstanding, anger, issues of communication or relationships in our family. When we sense the drift an inch or two, that's the time to go time out, time out. So, wait a minute. Um, you know, look, I was out of line. The way I talked to you was out of line. You walking off and slamming your bedroom door, that's out of line. Let's cooler heads, give it 30 minutes, an hour. Let's sit down and go, wait a minute. We need to recalibrate how we're going to communicate because that was not what we want to keep repeating. Doesn't always work, and you don't always have cooperative children. I got it. However, it's way easier to do that. If that happened on a Monday, it's way easier to do that relatively soon. I don't mean like 6 seconds after. I mean that day or the next day. Then 2 years later, when now that's happened 100 times. And that's
Yeah.
become the new pattern for us in how we communicate with our wives or with our kids. So keeping short accounts, right? It's like we can't go into a lot of relational debt. And it's wild because the metaphor is so
That's
pure
a good metaphor, the
on the
relational
finance
debt.
side, right? It makes
Yeah.
sense because, like, if you're $10 in debt, you work an extra 20 minutes, you get the $10, you pay the man, right? And you're out of debt. If you're $1 million in debt, that's gonna probably take years, if even, right? If you ever get out. We don't want to incur a lot of unchecked relational debt because it becomes very hard to get ourselves out of it.
Um, and, look, I asked you a question yesterday when we were talking, and, I think the answer to how many guys do you think are struggling with something like this, where they do truly feel completely overwhelmed and maybe things are too far gone? And I think the answer is unfortunately the feeling of that, maybe not the reality, but the feeling of that is probably more often than, or more so than you would think. But here's what I feel like is a bit of good news. Lamentations 3 verse 22 starts with, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And so maybe the consequences are real, and it's going to be months, perhaps even years, but every day his love never ceases and his mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. And then Romans 8, 26 through 28, read that. If that's what you're feeling, um, because of something you did or something maybe you need to bestow and kind of help your child or your wife or a friend in your life who's really beat down. This is a great reminder to all of us. 26 says, likewise, and here's why I feel like this is for me anyway, because I don't know what to say a lot of times. I don't know what to do. It's just that
Mm,
it feels like it's so far out of our hands. I'm not even sure what to pray sometimes. And so we and so this removes sort of that the burden of the weight of that on us, as individuals. It says, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. And He who searches hearts knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. I feel like those two things
mm,
resonate together, as if someone feels like they're drifting and you go, "Hey, I know you're not drifting but drowning," and the waves are crashing against their face and they're already kind of fighting to stay afloat, and you go handle this problem and
yeah.
throw something at them. That's just that much more heavy and scary. And so, thankfully, we're not in it by ourselves. It
Yeah.
is truly not up to us to restore. We walk alongside the one who has the power to restore, and not only work in our hearts, but in theirs.
Man, if you're trying to get somebody else's heart to change, good luck. Uh, that's above your pay grade. That's above your pay grade. However, you can do your part to create the soil in which you give their heart the best chance of changing. So for example, take the guy who's having let's just say marriage troubles right now. He's rocky marriage, tough times at home. He and his wife are at odds and they're trying to raise kids, but man, marriage seems to be getting in the way and all this stuff. You as the man can behave in a way that gives your wife more of a chance and a better kind of greenhouse to have her love for you be warm and spiritual and returned.
Yeah,
Like you
interesting
can do
analogy.
that. You can
I
build the
like that.
greenhouse.
Yeah.
Now you can't shove it'd be like you build the greenhouse and then you put a plant in the center and then you just start yelling at the plant. You're in you're in the greenhouse. Now I want you to grow. And you have this like posture.
Ha, wow.
Stop. You're going to create an environment where it is natural for someone to grow under your leadership. You're going to create that environment best you can. There may be some of those panes in the greenhouse kind of taped up and some caulk around them and, piece of cardboard on one edge, but still, you're going to create an environment where the people in your home can, fill in the blank, be honest, grow, laugh, cry, say what's on their mind without fear of recrimination, etc. You're going to create an environment. That does not mean that you or anybody else in that environment are going to behave exactly the way you want 100% of the time. What it does mean is you're going to be faithful. I love to talk to this topic with dads a lot, Lawson, because sometimes we can drift into thinking, hey man, if we're a really good dad, and then you just fill in the blank with all these positive outcomes. Our kids are going to love us. They're all going to marry good Christian men and women. They're going to go to our same church. They won't ever get a tattoo, whatever, right? I mean, we have like this long list of things that we believe are going to happen because we are faithful or because we are intentional as dads. Garden of Eden. Okay. Garden of Eden. The end. Perfect dad, perfect world, perfect setup, perfect man and woman, perfect everything. And we still manage to lie, disobey, cover things up, blame other people. Humans are not very reliable at taking a perfect scenario and behaving perfectly within a perfect scenario. Your house is no different. Therefore, and this is what, when you go back to Romans chapter 8 and you're in verses 26 through 28, this is what folks miss, I think, often about that verse 28, right? And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Sometimes the way we read that is on earth, everything's going to work out perfectly for the Christian. Wow. Stop. I mean, tell that to Dietrich Bonhoeffer or Joan of Arc, right? Or Jesus Christ. Like on earth, it does not always work out perfectly. If you go back to the verse that you started with, Lawson, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we don't even know what to pray for, but the Spirit intercedes and he searches the heart because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. So that's speaking in heavenly terms, primarily, in the eternal terms. The truth of the matter is, after I die, everything works out great for me. Like, that is true. That is 100% true. Up till I die, a lot remains to be seen. A lot remains to be seen. And I think if we interpret that section of Romans 8 correctly, we take joy in what's going to happen in the future, and it gives us endurance and strength for the present. But we can't take it and just go, you know what? Oh, this means that like all of my estranged kids will no longer be estranged, or all of my financial problems will no longer be a problem, or my wife who hates me will love me a lot tomorrow. No, that's not what Romans 8:28 is telling you, man. What Romans 8:28 is telling you is that there's a bigger game afoot. There's a game being played that is in the spiritual realms, that is eternal, and that you win. You win that game. The defense doesn't even get to score. You win that game in a landslide victory, but that is eternal. That is eternal. And sometimes on earth, man, it doesn't manifest the way that we want. It doesn't. Hebrews 11, the Hall of Faith, right, talks about all these people, Barak and Samson and Deborah, you name them. And it says, but all of these did not get what they were promised. They saw it and received it as seeing it from afar. Like there was a promise they were headed toward, these men and women of faith. And because they knew they were headed for a promise that could not be shaken, they had strength to live for today and to not despair and to not feel like, well, it's just too late. There's no hope at all. No, there's hope. Now, your hope might be on the other side of death. We'll see. But there's also a ton of hope on this earth. I know tons of people who've been in relatively hopeless situations. But even on this earth, God turned it around. It took some time. They might have had to pay a price. They may have spent time in, a penitentiary. They may have spent time in debt. They may have spent time, separated from their wife.
Rehab.
At the end of the day, I've seen so many turnarounds. Doesn't always work the way I want, or the timing isn't always what I would think would be the right timing. But Dad, it is never too late. Is that it? Was that the last part?
I thought you were closing, bro.
Dad, on the off chance we just kept this rolling, I think we're still recording, as far as I know. It is never too late. And if we adopt the mindset that like God's up to something, he'll reveal it to us over time. Do not despair and do not add, infinity and future permanency to things that are temporary, and be willing to do the work to dig your way out of the part of it that you might have caused. Be willing to do that work. And let's just see God's faithfulness on the other side. And I pray you'll see this even yet on this earth. I pray you'll see some evidences of this, because you're not a father on accident. So go be a father on purpose.